Welcome! You are listening to the CRM Success Show, where you will hear from CRM executives who have overseen some of the most interesting and complex CRM implementations. Your hosts, David Masri and Kira Whitey, will be bringing you real stories, real insight. Follow along on social media for updates on new episode releases, exclusive content, and much more. Enjoy the show, and thanks for listening.
Welcome to the CRM Success Show, where we deep dive into CRM success and failure, delivering real stories and with real impact. I'm Dave Masri.
And I'm Kira Whitey.
And today we're talking with Melanie Dixon, who'll be telling us about her time as the Director of Enterprise Systems at Ochsner Health. So welcome, Melanie.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So Melanie, real simple to kick us off for today. Please give our listeners an overview of your background experience with Salesforce and a little bit about your title. What does that encompass at Ochsner Health, please?
Okay. Ochsner Health is the largest health system in Louisiana. We have 40 plus hospitals, 34,000 employees. And I started at Ochsner about 7 years ago. I was a project manager. Coming off of one of our local museums, I led one of their major expansions. Was ready for my next fun time, and so I landed at Ochsner Health. I happened to land in IT without healthcare experience and without technology. So I'd have to say that I walked in with a little bit of imposter syndrome. Faked it till I made it, and ended up being on the enterprise CRM implementation project on the client side. So I was the project manager for the client side. We partnered with an implementation partner and implemented Marketing Cloud, Health Cloud, and Commerce Cloud over a couple of year period. During that time, I don't know if other systems do this, but ours sure does. We reorged. We kind of follow what operations does. So operations developed a digital consumerism team. And so we needed an IT digital consumerism team to partner with them and support them. And so a manager position came up for the Salesforce team. At that point, I wouldn't say I knew the most about Salesforce, but I knew the most about our Salesforce environment from the project. And so I was able to come on board and lead a very talented development team that kind of continued to grow over the next 4 or 5 years to include some other platforms. So SharePoint, ServiceNow, our RPA platform, which is UiPath, and then our Power Platforms. So what I found during all of that is that my superpower outside of project management is growing platforms.
Good.
That's what I did.
Okay. And Ochsner Health, just to give bit of context for listeners, huge non-profit healthcare provider. Right. I was reading prior to the recording about 1.5 million patients every year. Mm-hmm. Any particular specialism area they focus on specifically?
No, it's your traditional healthcare system. We have a fantastic transplant department, but we are just one of the largest in Louisiana.
Fantastic. Your background prior was with a museum. Right. How much do you think your project management experience there served you and set you up for success starting out in that project manager role with Ochsner Health?
Well, I'll give you my spiel of project management. It's kind of the key. I think it's the key to life. There's 3 pillars of project management. I don't even know if they're pillars, but 3, like the secret sauce of project management. And if you can do these 3 things, I feel that you can do anything. So whether that be leading a dev team, whether that be, performing live in front of people. If you can manage expectations, anticipate the needs of your customer, and then be flexible in your communication style, you'll be a good project manager along with a good leader, et cetera. So I've always followed those. and actually learned it when one of my first jobs was at Waffle House. She has no idea that I still talk about her, but Rhonda was my manager, and Rhonda would take me up to a table and she would say, okay, Melanie, this person, customer A ordered a burger, customer B ordered a steak. And what do you need to bring them? And so you would have to figure out that you would need to bring them ketchup and mustard for the burger and A1 sauce. I'm going to cringe saying it, but A1 sauce and a steak knife for the steak. And so that was that, at 16, I think I was learning that you needed to anticipate the needs of your customer, of your client, of your leader, of anyone that you're dealing with, of your wife, of your husband, of whomever, of your kids. Anticipate those needs. It really makes for a smooth whatever you're doing. So moving to project management in IT, I was able to not just follow your traditional, project manager skills. I used those kind of soft skills to be successful. So everything I learned at the National Museum that I was at in New Orleans to Ochsner Health allowed me to be successful at Ochsner Health.
And I think also really cool, every 18 months to 2 years to 3 years, progressive promotions, more responsibility, bigger title, etc. So obviously it's paying off, and kudos to you for that. Thanks. As well, making it happen. I'm sure wherever Rhonda is now, she's going to be proud to hear your story and growth, and should definitely be taking a little bit of credit for your success, I think, with the project management mentality. If
I could ever find her, I would let her know.
Well, I'm good at finding people, so maybe we'll challenge accepted. We'll talk about it more after the show. Over to you, Maz.
All right, cool. So believe it or not, I also got my start in Salesforce ecosystem in project management. So it's really interesting. So when you started at Ochsner, you started as a PM, but not within the Salesforce space, and then moved into.
That's right. I was in their IS PMO. So we had a PMO that was very small. I believe we had 4 or 5 project managers. Project managers are needed everywhere, but we were brought in to oversee multi-departmental or multi-divisional projects that were really trying to keep everyone going. So if you have a project in your department, it's a lot easier to move from stage to stage. But when you're dealing with multi-departmental projects, you need someone to kind of herd the cats, and it is constant cat herding. And so that's what we were doing. And I really lucked out in being selected for the enterprise CRM implementation. It taught me a lot. And now I'm super passionate about Salesforce.
Yeah. It's interesting. People always that's the question now. How do I get into the Salesforce ecosystem? How do I do it? This was 8 years ago or so? How long ago was it?
About 7 years. Yeah.
7 or so years. Yeah. I don't know how effective it would be today. I don't know, Kiro, if you know, if this is a good path to try to break in as opposed to the admin path.
I mean, look, I think with Agentforce, and given the entry point to becoming an admin is higher than it's ever been before, I think personally, if you're coming from a BA or PM background, you're probably more likely to get that initial shot, because I think those roles in particular, those 2 projects, two job titles in particular, there's a lot more transferable skill sets within them than Salesforce admin. A SharePoint admin to a Salesforce admin is very different, where a BA on taking requirements down from a Salesforce project is not too dissimilar to a Dynamics project, for example. Melanie, maybe you felt the same as well.
Yeah, 100%. The team that I led at Ochsner, definitely, they were wearing many hats. So they were being the BA, they were the trainer, they were the developer, they were the admin. They were doing all of these different roles, which made them the most well-rounded developers ever. So when I joined the team, I did start hiring those admins and trainers and QA and different roles, so they didn't have to serve in those capacities, but it was invaluable to them to be a developer that is traditionally heads down, or an admin that maybe not is so heads down, but having that like head down role, but having to be a BA and deal with the business and learn how to gather those requirements. And kind of some of the admins were serving as project managers. So all of those skills I think are so fantastic to kind of round out a person.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that, because that's what I see from my clients that I support as well. The biggest need and ask is for, especially for full-time hires, is for the softer skills to be naturally curious and asking questions. Well, why have we done it like this before? Do we need to continue to doing that in the new future to be state, right? Sometimes you can have a technical admin, they're not necessarily going to ask those types of questions. It's very much ticket orientated, task focused, as opposed to the interpersonal type skill set. So I would definitely, Maz, I'd definitely say if anyone's looking to get into Salesforce, there is opportunity, but more so from probably a BA PM aspect, as opposed to the traditional admin route.
Okay, yeah, that's good to know for sure. All right, so Melanie, you got in from the project manager, lucked out, I would say, got assigned Salesforce, and then I understand that like you almost stepped, I won't say out of your role, but expanded your role to almost become like an evangelist, right? Really pushing the platform, and then helping the organization like say, hey, you can use Salesforce here, and like really growing, I guess, the Salesforce footprint within the organization. Can you tell us a bit about that? Like, what you did there, maybe a little bit about the why also.
Yeah, I would say the why was because project management, there was always stuff going on, right? So you always had a project. And so you were always looking, once that project was over, you were looking for your next project. So I don't know how to slow down. So having a robust roadmap is always my goal. And so after we finished the enterprise CRM project, I wouldn't even say after we finished it, probably about halfway through, because we were using an implementation partner, we still had we had 4 at that time, I believe, developers. And so they still had capacity that I needed to fill. And so how did I do that? We had a handful of kind of sales cloud, traditional Salesforce sales use cases like business development and like our what we call direct to employer. So our folks would go out to employers and sell products to their employees, and then they would transfer to like these different programs. So we had these like sales use cases. So once we implemented the enterprise CRM Health Cloud, I needed to fill their bucket with other things. So I started thinking about like, how do I do that? Who else needs to use Salesforce? And let me make a note. Previous to my time at Ochsner, I had never heard of Salesforce before. So I am very new in this whole ecosystem. 7 years is not that long. And so I had a lot to learn. So I dug in and like learned all of the different ways you could use Salesforce. And to be clear, Ochsner loves the shiny toys when it comes to Salesforce. So we have all the products, maybe not all the products, but we have like Health Cloud, and we had Experience Cloud. We still do CRM, CRMA, Salesforce Maps, territory planning. We have all these things. And so how do all of these kind of play with each other? So what we started doing is talking about how either current state use cases could, like, what is their full life cycle, I guess is the statement. What are they doing before they get onto Salesforce? What are they doing after they get on Salesforce? So, and that was a clear way to become, to expand the platform. So an example there is within IS, we needed a solution. We had a solution, but it was in SharePoint, and it didn't give people enough visibility. But we needed a solution for our Epic, which is our EHR. We needed our Epic trainers to be able to look and see what the status of a new employee coming in, what their training status was, because you have to take Epic training in order to get Epic access, in order to be a nurse on the floor or a provider or any other clinician. You have to have certain access levels and you have to take that training. Current state was that they did not have visibility into where the new employees were and what they were, whether they had taken the training, whether they had not. If they had not, sometimes they would show up on the hospital floor and not be able to do their job. So we needed a solution. We built it out in Salesforce, platform licenses, very affordable, but like what happens before that? So that's kind of an HR use case. Before that is talent acquisition. So before you become an employee, you're a candidate or you're a prospect. And then you become a candidate, and all of these are done outside of what HR uses as their source of truth. We use Workday. So, and they were done in like legacy systems that weren't very good. You couldn't track very well. We were spending a lot of money. So we decided to start looking at how we can do this all in Salesforce. So we built out talent acquisition into Salesforce. And then the next stage would be, once you become an employee, how do we keep you happy and engaged? And so that's called talent management. So we have a ton of programs that we built onto Salesforce so that they could track those programs and the outcomes of those programs. They were doing it on spreadsheets before. So lots of Excel spreadsheets, managing of that. And so we essentially automated all their workflows. And then you look, the next is career center. So same thing, like you have these programs you've gone through. So how do we elevate your next level? How do you become a director? How do you become an admin to a developer? All those pathways, those kind of programs are also managed in Salesforce. And we haven't gotten there yet, but the goal is to have like that alumni piece. So outreach to folks that have left the system, but maybe want to boomerang back or have moved away and they end up moving back. We want to keep that contact with the alumni so that we can, get them back when they're ready. So looking at that full end-to-end life cycle of whatever that consumer base is how we decided to grow the platform. And it just became an easy thing. It became like a list of people that wanted to come onto Salesforce instead of like having to search for them.
Right. So you were using a partner, and you're continuing to expand over 7 years. That's expensive. Like any issues getting pushed back, like, with the budget?
So I think this is also pretty key to a successful Salesforce ecosystem is having a good implementation partner or SI. And we found one. We were very lucky and it's not luck. I mean, they did a great job when we bid the project out for that enterprise CRM project. We went with Slalom. They did many of our implementations, many of our expansion projects, but the goal was always to work them out of a job. And they knew that. So we partnered our developers with their developers or with their principals and made sure that it wasn't just a knowledge transfer. They were working alongside them. And so the majority of our expansion was done without an implementation partner. But because they were able to, or because they became such a great partner for us, when we stopped using them, they kind of flexed and became a strategic partner. And that ability to not just like always going after the dollar allowed us to continue to use them. And now we use them across several platforms. We use them in the ServiceNow space. We use them in tech assessment. We use them all over. They're just a really, really great strategic partner for us, but they don't typically do any of our implementations anymore. So from a budget standpoint, if you invest in your team along with investing in your SI, then eventually that budget will decrease.
It sounds real simple, but just doing the right thing, as to your customer, right? You're going to get other opportunities to land and expand into that account, and if you do a good job, people trust you, they're going to introduce you to different areas of that business. So
That's right.
it sounds like that's exactly the model that those guys have taken, and perhaps good reminder for a lot of other SIs out there as well, right? Think about the bigger picture, not just the immediate statement of work that you're trying to sell. So just to backtrack a little bit on Ochsner's journey. So prior to Health Cloud, there was Sales Cloud. Prior to Sales Cloud, were they coming from a legacy healthcare related CRM or anything like that, or was it just all spreadsheets and Excel? Or
we did use a different CRM. It was benefiting, I would say. It was patient marketing. So it was billed as a CRM, but it really wasn't a true CRM. So you could outreach, and you could outreach based on data, but there was no, if you look at like the full like gamut of a CRM, how robust it can be, which is being able to track, being able to aggregate data and then make decisions based on that data. It's not just patient marketing. It's not just that. So we were using a patient marketing tool. It was, I'd say, I might get this wrong, but I want to say it was like 95% outsourced. And so, and Ochsner Health is very innovative. So we like to personalize our messaging and put together propensity models for who we think may be at risk for certain, diseases or whatnot, and then like target them and market to them so that we can get them healthy.
Okay. In terms of choosing Health Cloud, what was the reason for that, Melanie? And what do you think the biggest benefit, if there is another healthcare organization and ahhing, should we go from Sales Cloud to Health Cloud? What I guess would be your advice to them, and the reason you did that as an organization?
So we went with Health Cloud because it had cases. So like we were using Sales Cloud for traditional sales use cases. So when we went to Health Cloud, when we implemented Health Cloud, it was being implemented in our contact center so we needed the cases so that we could track the calls. And so that's why we went with Health Cloud. It was implemented by an SI. So we did not, so that implementation was fine. When we decided to migrate our sales, well, let me backtrack for a second. Our traditional sales use cases were spun up in one org. When we implemented Health Cloud, we decided to spin up a new org. Once that implementation was complete, we migrated the other org to the new org. That way we could clean up the data from the old org and kind of start fresh. And so that, I would say that migration probably had a little bit more heartburn than the initial Health Cloud implementation. But because we went with a strong implementation partner, I feel like we didn't hit as many like roadblocks as I've heard other systems have had to go through. So,
and how important were, for instance, the integration capability with your EHR, like Epic? How important was that in the decision making process? That all the work you'd done on that side of the application, you couldn't lose that integration capability. So I don't know if there was an alternative to Health Cloud you looked at the time from another business, but how much was that a factor to your decision making? Because I see Epic as kind of like one of the main EHR systems that exists. So
it is. We did not actually look at any other CRM systems because of Salesforce capabilities. So if we were just looking for patient marketing, it'd be one thing, but because we were also looking for our contact center, and then we also we're a little different than a lot of healthcare or health systems. We implemented Commerce Cloud as well. We have a whole health and wellness side of the house where it's fitness centers and performance training and cosmetic procedures and whatnot that are kind of outside of your traditional clinical use cases. So we implemented Commerce Cloud as well. And you can't get that anywhere else. So we didn't look at anything else. But back to your question about the integration into the EHR, that's key. I mean, that's where the gold is, right? So you have to be able to look at that data in order to personalize to your patients or other consumers.
Got you. And what about when you talk about healthcare industry and data, most will jump to HIPAA compliance, right? And my understanding is Health Cloud, Salesforce Health Cloud helps healthcare businesses because it comes with a built-in compliant out-of-the-box functionality that allows you to secure your PHI records and information. So
that is key.
It is key, right? It is key. But any issues there? Was it seamless as it's made out to be?
That piece was seamless. I don't feel there were any. I mean, outside of getting a BAA in place, like that's that part didn't cause any issues.
I'm pretty sure that core Salesforce is HIPAA compliant too. So I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not an expert in this area, but I'm pretty sure. So
yeah, our previous use cases didn't use patient data, so we didn't have a need for it to be HIPAA compliant. But I think you're right.
You might need Shield. I'm not sure if you have to have Shield to be HIPAA compliant because of the auditing. But I'm not sure.
We don't have Shield.
Okay, I guess you don't need it. So tell me about that migration. So you decided to migrate your legacy org to a new org with Health Cloud and then completely shut down the old org. So it was a full.
It's pretty much shut down. We kind of keep it open in case we need to. We left some of the data there because we only brought over
right, you kept like one license in case you need to
go
back and look.
Yeah.
Yeah, so tell us about that. Like, what about like all of the non-Health Cloud use cases? Did you like try to lift and shift the code over? What was the strategy for tackling this?
So we relied heavily on our implementation partner and our developers. So there was a lot of lifting and shifting. There was a lot of data cleanup and then a lot of, I believe, I'm not the technical person, but I do believe they had to go review a lot of that code, anything that was being pulled over. But we had, again, that SI is key to make sure that you're doing the right thing.
But they also knew your legacy org too.
Yeah, only bring over what's necessary, right?
No, I mean, they were familiar with the code base. It's not like you brought in a new SI to lift and shift.
Oh, no. That's the whole point of getting a strong SI is that you keep them for additional projects so that they are familiar with your org. So in all of your environment, we did that across multiple expansions. When we expanded from a marketing cloud standpoint, we expanded from patient marketing to internal communications. We used Slalom as well in that aspect. So that they understood, they knew what they had just built. So like we didn't have to have that whole, yes, we had requirements gathering, but we didn't have a ton of discovery, which can be, as you know, like overly painful because you're repeating yourself 6 times. So.
In terms of not necessarily challenges you encountered during the implementation, I'm sure there were a few, and if you want to quickly highlight a couple, then please do. But I'm curious, an implementation isn't a straight line. So was there a stage during the implementation where you had to kind of pause, pivot, and maybe go with plan B or plan C?
100%. So I don't want to oversimplify phase 1, phase 2, but Phase one was marketing cloud, basic health cloud, so basic contact center use cases. No near real-time feed, but a batch feed, so of our EHR data. Phase two was kind of optimizing it, doing advanced marketing cloud features, and then the near real-time feed for our contact center. Phase three was Commerce Cloud. That is where, if we did it all again, I don't know if I would suggest to implement Commerce Cloud in the healthcare system. I think it's definitely has a future there, but we had no idea from a business standpoint. I'm going to say from an IS standpoint, have no idea what we were doing in commerce. So we didn't have an order management system. Her name was Katie. We didn't have a warehouse management system. Our people were printing out labels and then dropping off at their local FedEx on their way out. And so there was no tracking. I mean, there was tracking, but there was no like sending out to the customer. Things you expect in this day and age. We didn't have any of that stuff, and we didn't know we needed any of that stuff. So implementing straight Commerce Cloud was not the way to do it. So when we were working with Slalom, they were like, okay, where's your OMS? Okay, where's your WMS? And we're like, I don't know what you're talking about. And so we had to, and then the other thing we were doing, and I'm going to say this, and I don't mean this in any, I always say that we were held together by bubble gum and duct tape. We did a damn good job of the bubble gum and duct tape, but we were in our brick and mortar stores using whatever online system they were using. We were using that to take the order, and then we were using a knuckle buster or a swiper, and without any connection to the order and the actual payment capture. So we had to figure out that POS system as well along the way. So we had to pause and start the Commerce Cloud implementation 3 or 4 times. Luckily, Slalom was able to keep the same project team for the most part. Every time we stopped, we'd start again. So from everything, that was probably our timeline killer, our budget killer. It was definitely the challenge. But once we were able to get past all of that and get those items, the OMS implemented, we never did implement a warehouse management system, but we didn't feel like we needed it. We're not high volume. We're selling branded apparel and digital technologies. And so once we got past that, those few systems we had to implement, then we were able to implement. But it was definitely a challenge.
All right, cool. Let's go back to when you were getting started, right? So you're an experienced PM, but not necessarily heavy in tech. And then you kind of got thrown into this. So how did you tackle that, right? Did you just kind of say like you're going to run it like a non-tech project, and how different can it be? Or were you like proactive? And did it go as expected? What was surprising?
I would say that I went at it as I typically would any project management project, but I think I'm a different project manager. I dig in pretty heavily. I don't feel comfortable managing a project that I don't understand. And so I met with stakeholders. I met with Salesforce. I met with our implementation partner to learn as much as I could so that I could make sure we were doing the right things. I also had one of the other keys, so being a non-tech person, I relied heavily on the manager on my team. Like when I was leading the team at that point, he was a lead. And so I had a technical person that I leaned on so that I could understand what was needed. But we also had, and I think this is key, a lot of things are key, but change management to me is very important. I know a lot of people kind of are wishy-washy on it. Yes, they think it's important, but should there be a fully dedicated resource? I think there's a little bit of difference in how we handled it. So we did have a change manager assigned to the project from a Slalom side, but we also had a change manager assigned to the project from the client side, but that's not the key. Excuse me. Our change manager, very talented, figured out the secret sauce of change management. And that is kind of not just what the books say. So the books say communication and training, right? That's communication plan, training plan, that's your change management, making sure those things are tied up. But going a bit further, change management to me is finding those kinks in the chain. A lot of time people are so resistant to change. It's because they don't have enough time to understand the change. They think it's fine how it is, or maybe sometimes it's as easy as there's like a missing communication level. And so the people either at the bottom are not getting the communication to the top, or the top is not getting communication to the bottom. So we had a change manager that found all of those, let's call them areas of vulnerability, and solved them. And so it was very, very, it was very smooth. Our implementation, when we actually went live in our contact center, we didn't do that as a big bang. We did that phased, but like everything was, it couldn't have gone better. And I credit that to that change management. And not a lot, of course, you're going to have that training plan and that communication plan alongside that. But solving those other, areas of vulnerability are definitely key.
Was the change manager an internal hire that was already embedded into the business, knew who everyone was on the different work streams, or was that a resource that you sourced externally?
She was an internal project manager who actually worked for our strategic PMO. But interestingly enough, she was also a project manager at the same museum that I worked at. So I was very familiar with how she worked. We worked well together. She kind of served as the change manager. She actually knew a lot of the people as well, because she worked on a lot of strategic projects with some of the same key players. But she just dug in and found those kinks and then just solved them.
In terms
So
of change management,
you or you brought her in? She brought you in, or you brought her in?
So she was assigned to the project. So she was internal, but assigned to the project.
No,
So
I mean into the company.
So we, there was a couple of different people that left the museum and went to Ochsner, and we were all I followed her. So.
Yeah. Good. In terms of change management, I think it's a quick follow-up question to that one. I've heard arguments for both sides, but do you think if you had to hire somebody for a change management role or appoint someone as a change management role again, do you think it'd be more valuable to have somebody from external to the organization coming in, with the idea being there's less bias on certain work streams and pandering to certain people who have been in the business or they get on with better, versus putting someone internally? But the counter argument is they know the business, they know the different personality types, and can navigate them probably with a lot more success than someone coming in from the get-go. Where do you fall on that kind of options?
I fall on the internal, being assigned to the project, but having external guidance. If you're using an implementation partner or a partner of some sort, having that person guide you in perhaps providing communication plan templates or training templates or what have you, like that guidance is invaluable from the outside. But really those relationships, building those relationships within the stakeholders, the team members, the project team, all of that is really key. And you can't do that with an external person, not in enough time. Projects only, could be 6 months, could be a year, but you're not going to build those relationships like you would if you were an internal person.
Yeah, also internal people signals caring, if that makes sense, right? If you're doing it yourself, that means you care a lot more than offshoring it out to someone external to the organization. The other big thing with change management, just to point it, which I'm sure you know, is a part of that communication plan is a support system, right? Here's where you go if you have a problem, and we got your back type messaging. And again, that comes much better from an internal, I think.
And a lot of the times the conversations that you have, trying to find the kinks in the chain, as I was saying, reading people's cues from an internal, having those off the cuff conversations, a lot of that happens internally. So you need that relationship in order to solve those problems.
Yeah. So going back to your time as a PM, so technical people often don't like non-technical PMs. I'm just going to go out and say it. Did that cause you any problems, particularly new? So you're coming in now. Obviously, your partner, their job is to be patient, right? But internally, you have any struggles with that? Like, please explain this to me, and and they're like, it's obvious because you know what I'm saying.
So, yeah, I totally get that. I probably didn't say I didn't understand anything. I probably just asked the questions and let them explain things. But I have to say, with the Salesforce project, that enterprise CRM, it was so heavily operational that I was talking to marketing. So marketing would not expect me to understand their workflows, and the contact center, they wouldn't expect me to understand their workflows. And so the majority of work was done operationally in that project. Now, when I started leading the teams, they obviously knew I didn't understand 100% what they were doing, but I do think they knew I cared, right? So I think that goes a long way. They knew that I was there for them, that I was going to bat for them, that every step of the way was to benefit them and to benefit Ochsner, obviously, but I want to grow them as employees. I want to grow them as a team. I want to grow all of us together. And so I don't think they expected me to have the technical knowledge and understood if I needed it, they would explain it. But oftentimes I didn't need it. As long as they understood it from their side, I understood what needed to happen. We're in agreement on how that moves forward. And so they're all good. And I have to say, Ochsner's IS division is made up of some phenomenal people. And if you think about it from the EHR standpoint, so from an Epic standpoint, those are not necessarily technical people. So out of let's say when I started, 700 IS, employees, a third to half are Epic employees. They might have been working in the entertainment, like in the music or in the movie business. We have a big, movie business down here. But because they could pass the Epic tests and which are basically logic tests, they weren't technical either. So our IS department was hugely just good people who were willing to learn and wanted to learn.
And in terms of Epic as well, conscious we might have a few non-healthcare listeners today. Electronic health record system that healthcare organizations use to do primarily with patient records and workflows. And
Right.
Does it have a credentialing aspect to it, like checking the credentials of nurses and doctors and so on?
Yes.
Am I right in thinking that? Yeah.
Yes, there are tons of Epic modules that are used across multiple different areas, both in the clinic, in the hospital. A lot of people are, when they go to schedule an appointment, they're going to a portal, and that's also part of the EMR, the electronic medical record. What I found before I got into healthcare, I found it very amazing the first time I was able to go to a doctor's appointment and not have to explain my entire medical history to my doctor, because he could look in the system and see I had had an appointment the year before, I had had a surgery, I had had XYZ. And it was so nice it was a relief not to have to, sit there and explain myself and almost justify myself. So that's what the electronic medical record is. It's connecting all of the data of your clinical history.
It's something that sounds like it should be a given today, but it is amazing how many healthcare organizations still, and I think it's just part of it is the volume of the population, right? And people moving from state to state and transferring those records and cases and notes, and different businesses acquiring other, organizations. It can get messy, but yeah, not to be taken for granted. It would seem, even still as we go into 2025, for sure. So looking at reflecting back on that, I don't want to say it's a 7-year project, because it wasn't, but like 7-year tenure, using Salesforce, and transformative period of time, whether it was the initial implementation or kind of different phases. What would you say like one of the biggest light bulb moments were for you, where it all kind of just made sense?
It's funny that you asked that, because I vividly remember when I got it. And what we would do is someone would reach out, by the time, 3 or 4 years in, that's not when this happened, but people would start reaching out to us like, hey, does this work in Salesforce? But in the first year that I was on the Salesforce team, I would reach out to use cases or businesses and be like, hey, let me tell you what we do, and you tell me if it works, and if it's something that you can see yourself using, or a problem that we can solve for you. And I remember I was in a meeting like that, and the person was telling me what their problem was, and usually I kind of pivot to the technical resource that I would buddy up with and bring with me. I was the one that would set up, and I was the kind of the one that performed the outreach, and then he would provide the technical part. And instead of pivoting to him, I started solutioning, and I solutioned the entire thing for them. And then at the end, they were like, that sounds fantastic. Let's do it. And I was like, oh, there it is. I figured out how, and it's not just how core Salesforce works. It's all of those shiny toys that we have, how they all work together, how that Experience Cloud site works with the core site or core Salesforce, where there's an admin portion to where you're either capturing payment or outreaching to someone or lead management, all the different things you can use Salesforce for, but it's really connecting all of that and how you can use it together. I vividly remember that. And that's when I feel like that's when the light bulb went off. That's when I was really like, became this passionate Salesforce advocate.
Good. In terms of the implementation, what were some of the kind of the metrics and KPIs that you were adopting to ensure the implementation was an actual success? We know that it is, but how are you kind of justifying it to the stakeholders, the C-suite, etc.?
Sure. From a contact center perspective, it was a little difficult, because what was the benefit of Salesforce? The benefit of Salesforce in the contact center at that point was that we could now, they always knew what calls were coming in, but we could kind of document what percentage were Epic related, because the call center is there to help patients. The majority of it is going to result in an Epic transaction. So whether that be scheduling an appointment, canceling, rescheduling, checking, whatever test results, like anything that you can think of that someone's going to call for a clinical nature that you would check Epic for. But there's a big chunk. I think we ended up finding out that was 40% of our calls were non-Epic related. So they were not going anywhere before Salesforce. So you call, I need directions to this clinic. Okay, here's the directions. They'd pull it from a SharePoint site, give the directions, hang up, and that's it. They had no way of tracking. They could track the calls. They could kind of tie them together with what was happening in Epic, and then like this group of non-happening in Epic calls, but they couldn't give a percentage to which ones were directions, which ones were other use cases. So with Salesforce, that allowed us to do that. So there weren't really KPIs, but it was that ability to in the contact center. Marketing Cloud knocked it out of the park. Like, and we didn't own Marketing Cloud from an IS perspective. That was led and run out of our marketing department. We had a very, very talented marketing automation team. We were just responsible for getting the data to them, but they knocked it out of the park. They went from using a system that was outsourced to really insourcing everything and owning everything. And they were beating like all the click rates and all the other marketing type KPIs that they are tracking, to where when I was renewing every year, I'd see this kind of big line item that's like, in the 6-figure range. And I'm like, why are we paying for that? And I would call our marketing team and they'd say, hold on, let me check. Let me show you what we're doing with that one line item. And they say, like, we're using it for 2 use cases, but those 2 use cases are bringing in $1.5 million each. And I'm, okay, thank you very much. We will continue to pay for that. So Marketing Cloud was always the clear winner, and really took us above and beyond what we really expected. So
what about, so you were able to identify about 40% of the calls were perhaps calls that, maybe were or could have been one-time calls. So you were taking that analysis, building out like frequently asked question pages, or
you're on the right. Yeah. So with that 40%, what do you do with that data, right? How do you essentially stop those calls or provide something? So if 40% of them if they were all direction related, then we somehow need to provide these directions to our patients. So when you schedule an appointment, you should get an automatic email of directions to where your appointment is. If, whatever the other, how do you then deflect those calls essentially? So how do you get them so that if you stop that 40%, then you are opening yourself up to taking more calls that are clinical in nature, creating appointments, which brings in revenue to the system. So.
And I guess the overall goal is just continued process improvement. Reduce the number of calls means reduce the number of agents you need to employ, etc. Curious, is that a good use case for Agentforce? Obviously very hot on the topic at the moment, but I would imagine a lot of that could be done and replaced by Agentforce.
It could be. I think that a truly innovative health system, so Epic also has a Epic also has a contact center module that they are rolling out, which is very great they have something called Call Hub, and it's fantastic for contact centers. It lacks a little bit of the innovation that you need. So having Salesforce work alongside, kind of like that better together saying in that contact center space, and then having Agentforce, 100% would be the most innovative contact center. I don't know if we're ready for it though. It's healthcare is always a little bit behind. As innovative as we say we're always a little bit behind all of the other industries. So I don't know if we're quite ready for Agentforce in the contact center space. I can tell you we are ready for Agentforce in some of the other 45 different businesses that we have expanded to. But yeah, we'll see what happens. It could be an exciting, I don't call it a contact center anymore. It could be an exciting engagement center.
I've got a quick question before, I know Matt has a couple of questions we want to get in before we hit time, but what did you find more innovation took place? Was it in the healthcare space, or was it prior in the non-profit museum type industry? Just from your personal experience, would you say one was more advanced than the other, or?
So it's a hard question because, excuse me, in the museum space, the innovation happens in the exhibits, which is all outsourced. So that was part of my job, was to manage. I had a peer who built the building. She was like the construction manager. I was the project manager for it was a $300 million expansion. And there are 4 pillars of projects. So there's fabrication, integration, media, and lighting. So the integration and the media are the two innovative spaces. And so as you can imagine, trying to have a space come alive can be fantastically innovative. But it's a different innovation. It's, how do you make someone from 1945 look real? And then with healthcare, it's how are you integrating, how are you aggregating all of this data? And then what are you doing with it? And how are you, it's innovation in a different way. So I think they're both innovative. I think from a museum side of things, like outside of those exhibits, we were very, very, I wouldn't say archaic, but very not innovative. We had 300 people working there. So it was a much smaller organization, but they're both innovative, just in very different realms, I guess.
Yeah, it's quite possible. It's quite possible that it has to do with the time frame. The technology really did advance a lot in the last 7 years.
100%.
It doesn't seem like a long time, but when you talk about tech, if you go back to, the late 20 teens, the big data was the big thing, right? And now it kind of pivotal to how using that data, not just collecting it, and the effective management of it, and the AI data models. And yeah, and even internet speeds have changed quite a bit. I mean, not so much since then, but it kind of peaked out at that point. So yeah, so I think that might have a lot to do with it as well. So
Great.
you did construction PM, right? So how different did that from technology project management? What's the most stark difference?
So the difference, and I have to say that I struggled with this in the beginning, is how you manage the relationship to your vendor. So in construction management, as you can imagine, there are a lot more aggressive and abrupt personalities. And so when not the Salesforce project, but a different project, was when I first started at Ochsner, a vendor came back with a contract that was, the SOW was way higher than they had promised. And I spoke to them in a much more aggressive way than you typically would in technology project management projects. And then I got off the phone and immediately called them back, and there may have been some tears and some I'm sorry's, but it's definitely that's the big difference is the relationship management, especially in healthcare. The relationship management with your vendors is key. At least it is for me. It's something that I strive to have, is, just a good relationship, whether it be your implementation partner or any of the software systems that you might be using that are either adjacent or sit on top of whatever you're doing, making sure you have those good relationships, so they know who you are, so that you can get the things you need done. I mean, and plus, like, same thing with your account team. So the one thing that I'm most proud of with Salesforce, maybe not most proud of, but one of the things I'm really proud of is that our account team at Salesforce, it grew to this fantastic team that became my friends. So it's like that true meaning of Ohana, like what Salesforce, preaches is Ohana. And like that's the account team that we have. And it was a long way to get there. It also comes with growing the platform and growing the licenses. You get more people assigned to you, but we also, our team stayed pretty much the same over a few years. A lot of times those sales teams change, but they understood our environment, and that was key to me too. So it's just that relationship management's way different.
Okay, so we're just about at time, so let's wrap up with one quick question. Just what general advice would you give to someone who's a new PM in the Salesforce space?
A new PM in the Salesforce space Well, it depends on what you want to do. If you want to grow into leadership, then, you start looking at those opportunities, but really dig into what Salesforce can do, because it honestly is, it can do everything. Whether that's the right thing or not, being able to tell when it's the right thing is very important. But making sure you have, from a leadership perspective, the advice I would give to any organization would be to invest in an implementation partner, invest in your development team. Make sure you have that development team in place so you're not always relying on the implementation partner. Make sure there's some sort of governance in place so that you can have executive alignment. If you don't have that executive engagement, your Salesforce environment is going to suffer. And then making sure, going back to that great account team, making sure you have that in place so you're kind of covered from all sides. And that way, from a leadership perspective, I was always surrounded by the best people.
I'm going to flip that question on its head a little bit. What don't you do as a PM coming from operations, construction, marketing, whatever it might be, going into Salesforce?
Don't just follow traditional project management. It's not just an implementation. I've been involved in implementations where you're just rolling out a system. You get a status report at the end of the week. Someone's gathering requirements, they're implementing, they're showing it back. It is your traditional implementation. It's not fun, and there's no connection. So don't be that project manager. Dig in and figure it out. Like, find out what Salesforce can do, because it's really so powerful. And a lot of people don't understand that.
Especially coming from outside of Salesforce, right? I think you just maybe look at it as like another system. But Melanie, we appreciate you. Thank you for your time today. Hopefully you had as much fun as we did, and I'm sure our listeners will, giving it a listen.
Thank you. It's been great being here.
For our listeners, please do not forget to subscribe to the CRM Success Show for more episodes featuring leaders like Melanie, who are truly influencing the future of CRM. You can follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube, and listen to us on your chosen playlist, be it Spotify or Apple. Thank you very much.